First, I would like to introduce our panel. The first panelist is Dr. Jamie Osborne, and as I'm introducing your name, please feel free to come on up. She's a teacher, adjunct professor, and founder of Northern Virginia Classical Academy. Our second, Beauty Buckworks. How'd you come? Our second panelist today is Maria Keffler. She is a licensed Virginia teacher with a master's in educational psychology. She is a co-founder of Advocates Protecting Children and Arlington Parent Coalition. Please welcome Maria Keffler. Our third panelist today is Dr. Andrew Chavone. He's the president of St. Jerome Institute. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Andrew Chavone.
It's a long walk.
It is a long, it definitely is. Well, we're excited today because school choice is such a great thing, but a lot of times we talk about school choice, we talk about it in generalities. What we wanted to do here at Outperform Virginia is to talk about it in specifics. And so we got 3 experts today who have different aspects of school choice. And so first, I'm going to start off with my left here. With Dr. Osborne, I'm going to ask you and everyone the same question. Please tell us your school choice story, how you got involved in school choice.
Can you guys hear me? Can you hear me?
No, it's not us. No.
Okay. Hi, guys. I'm Jamie Osborne. Okay, Church. Hello, everybody. I'm Jamie Osborne. I was born and raised here in Fairfax County. Attended Fairfax County Public Schools from K to 12, when it used to be a good school division. Always wanted to be a teacher, so went on and got my degree in teaching. Ended up spending most of my career overseas in the international schools affiliated with the State Department. Came back, worked in public schools, and around the pandemic, I know it's cliche to say, I started to notice that there were some real problems with education. And like many of you, it kind of grew in strength. And so what I was seeing is that there was a real disconnect between my own educational philosophy and approach and what was going on in the schools. So namely, and I'll talk more about it, but a lack of content-rich instruction in the schools, and instead of that, more focus on trends or indoctrination, parents being cut out of the equation entirely. And also, I would say another thing that I noticed is a use of technology. The kids are being taught by, the laptops or the Chromebooks. And I think also, too, another thing is the behavior. There's no decorum in the classroom anymore. And so when I looked around, I was like, where do I go? I've spent 25 years in the classroom. I have 3 degrees in education. Do I just go to another district? No, you can't, because it's spread everywhere. And even private schools, if you go on their website, you'll look and see that the same educational approach and philosophy has seeped into the private schools. And so I was like, well, what do I do? And the only conclusion that I had was that I start my own school focused on what I know is best for students. And so that's why I'm here. So in the fall, I'm really happy to announce I'm going to be starting a micro school in Fairfax City that's focused on classical education for K to 8 students.
Great. How are you to Yeah, so you could tell us about your organization, what brought you to the school choice movement.
Sure. I'm Maria Kessler, and I'm a co-founder of Arlington Parent Coalition and also Advocates Protecting Children. And we provide resources, guidance for anyone who's dealing with gender ideology in the schools. I got involved in that early in 2019. I was a teacher, trained as a teacher and licensed in Virginia and Indiana, but I was a stay-at-home mom for almost 20 years. I have 3 children who are now 18, 20, and 22. But early 2019, a friend of mine called me. We were in the Arlington Public School System, and she said, Maria, I was looking around the school website for some summer school information. I came across this working group meeting for transgender student policy. It's tonight. Can you go with me? Because I don't want to go by myself. So we went. We weren't allowed to participate, but we were allowed to watch. And it was horrifying. there were about a dozen people, students, teachers, administrators, parents, sitting around a table talking about what they wanted to see in terms of gender ideology policy in the schools. And the big takeaway for me from that evening was that parents are a threat to their children, and the school needs to help the parents along. The director of counseling for Arlington Public Schools said that it's the school's job to help the parents along if they're not on board with gender ideology yet, and kids need to be protected from their parents. That was the most arrogant or horrifying thing I'd ever heard in person. And so we started pushing back in the school system. And by pushing back, all we were asking for at that time in 2019 was, hey, school board, please delay the vote on this until everyone who's interested has a chance to participate. Because doing some Freedom of Information Act requests, we discovered Arlington Public Schools had been in conference in Congress with the Arlington Gender Identity Allies alone for 9 months. Nobody knew about it. We found out about it and we said, hey, we'd like to be invited to the next meeting. And they said, oh, sure, we'll invite you. Another FOIA request revealed that we were not invited to subsequent meetings. So we asked, just please postpone this until everyone's voice can be heard. We used an online petition form called Care2, put out a petition asking the school board to please just delay the vote. Got 125 signatures in the first 24 hours, and then Care2 deleted us and said that we violated their terms of service. They never did answer us about why. So I saw this happening, and my husband and I pulled our 3 kids. I had been a public school proponent as a publicly licensed teacher for years. And at that point, I said, no, it's not safe anymore. We pulled our kids. Incidentally, COVID happened the very next year. That was 2019. We were homeschooling. COVID didn't bother us. We just kept on as we were, and what a blessing that was. And then my youngest went to a Christian private school for 3 years of her high school. Long story there, I won't bore you with, but I also ended up teaching there. So I've been in the public schools, I've been in the private schools, I've been homeschooling, both as a parent and a teacher, and I'm really scared for the future of our children, the future of our families, and we need to have school choice. We need to have better options. We need to be protecting our next generation, teaching them critical thinking skills, teaching them truth, teaching them things that are going to serve them in the future and not just make them fodder for some of this indoctrination that's going on.
Thank you. Sure. Yeah, so it really stems from my time in Texas. So I come from Texas, and Texas is maybe a few years ahead in the school choice movement of Virginia. We just recently, last year, passed a $1 billion bill that is funding private schools, all sorts of different opportunities. So over $10,000 for any family that's approved in Texas to go to any educational choice that they choose. So that's a great thing that's just recently passed in Texas. It took about 20 years. It was opposed by many groups that you would be surprised opposed it. So I came, the way I came into it was really as a teacher in a private Catholic school, and seeing the very difficult dilemma that many of our families came across. They either had to send their kids to schools that not only opposed their basic fundamental principles, but they didn't even teach them how to read and write. Any of you who've done a research into the whole reading fiasco, the whole language reading fiasco, for many, many years, we were teaching kids how to read in a method that's proven not to work. We're putting kids in front of laptops all day long. Well, we absolutely know that it is bad for them. And we're doing it all because it's easier to do it that way. And so families are in this really difficult position. You either send your kids into this environment that you know is not going to be good to them, or you bankrupt yourself. Right. That's your option. So, yeah, I mean, that. I could give a whole long history about that by the school, but one of the reasons I'm so deeply supportive of that is because I see on a daily basis, because I look at my budget, I look at the families coming to me, I can pay my teachers at my high school, the St. Jerome Institute, which is opening up in Falls Church in 2026, 9th and 10th grade. Look us up. And I see all of those things, and then I look at the amount of money. I live in Prince George County, Virginia. We spend $23,000 a year per student. Do you know how many of those schools even have, can't remember the word, the students are have a proficient in reading? Out of all the schools in Prince George County, the average was 13%. In Baltimore, okay, well, that's just giving meat to. Sorry, I live in Virginia. I live in Maryland. We're opening up a school here in Virginia. So I look at it from a school perspective. I'm daily with parents. I'm with students. I'm not in politics. I'm simply on the ground with parents. And what I see is the parents really struggling with this very difficult decision. And we should have the state support families in this. They pay taxes. It's their money. They should be given what they need to support their families. So I just see it from a very on the ground, boots on the ground level. That's why I support it.
Tell us more about your school and what type of model of education you guys will be using.
Yeah, so we are a Catholic integrated liberal arts school. We have a campus right now in Washington, D.C. So we have about 80 students there. Our students, with a very low-tech environment, everything's done by a Socratic seminar. Most of you have probably heard about Socratic seminar. Every single one of our classes is taught from the science to the math to the art. It's all done with a deeply attentive to the students developing of all of their capacities in reason and virtue. We have a school that we're opening up in Falls Church at St. Philip's Parish. The number of families in Northern Virginia wanted to send their students to our school in D.C., but it's impossible to get to D.C. from Northern Virginia, and the traffic is just absolutely awful. And then we had that parish building open up, and we really took it as a sign from God that this was an opportunity to serve families in Northern Virginia. So we'll be opening up 9th and 10th grades. I'm the president of it, so I'll be overseeing both the D.C. campus and the Northern Virginia campus.
For those who aren't familiar with the Socratic method, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so if we're your typical classroom, especially these days, if you walk in, what you'll see, right, is the teacher, the sage on the stage, right, who's standing there. And now it's even worse than the sage on the stage. It's probably a PowerPoint. And it's the same lesson over and over and over again. And the student's job is to take that information and spit it back to the teacher. That's what education looks like. And good students are able to do that quickly, and they're able to get a lot of material. What doesn't happen there is thinking. So a Socratic method flips that. And I'll give you just one example. In our 9th grade class, in 9th grade humanities, the students will read, for example, the Odyssey. They'll read it slowly. They'll read maybe 20 pages at a time. And they come into class, they sit in a circle, and this teacher sits in the center. He proposes a question, and then he doesn't talk. And the students are expected and evaluated on their participation and the quality of their comments. So at the end of it, the teacher evaluates them on how well they did. The burden is on them to do the thinking and the learning, not the teacher. So now the teacher's not just spending all the time online and doing all that. The kids are actually having a conversation, and they're learning from each other. It's the most amazing thing to see a student point out something in a text. And then another student say, well, no, that's wrong. Odysseus is good because of X, Y, and Z, or Odysseus actually did something wrong here because of X, Y, and Z. And then they have a real conversation. They'll remember that conversation. If the teacher was up in front and just said, here's this book, The Odyssey, somebody wrote it 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, this is about as dull as it can be. Why is this one of the greatest texts of human history? It's because telling us something about the deep struggle and mystery of human existence. So the students engage every single day in conversations like that. So by the end of that 4 years, they're able to have really meaningful, deep conversations and engage with each other, most of our students say they're really bored in college because they don't have that. It's just listening to lectures all the time. So that's the basic principles for Socratic.
Can I say something to that? We use the Socratic seminar method as well at my private school. And one of our students who went on to get a full 4-year ride, and I can't remember at what college, but he talked about going for an interview to get this scholarship. And he got there, he didn't realize this was going to be the setup. It was all of the kids who were up for that scholarship were sitting around, and they were supposed to discuss questions. And he said it was basically a Socratic seminar, and nobody else knew how to do it. And he said, I mostly talked the whole time and asked other people questions, and sometimes they answered him and they didn't, and he got scholarship.
Well, journalists don't know how to disagree anymore. Yeah, Nathan just mentioned the sort of civic. This teaches them how to disagree. This teaches them how to have a debate without it becoming, I hate you, you're evil. But we're having this conversation. Our students are really, really comfortable being disagreed.
Go on and on. Yeah, don't ask me questions. I want to follow up. Kappa, talk about your school choice, what you guys do, and how we get involved.
About what we as a family have done.
Homeschooling.
Okay.
Homeschooling.
Yeah, we pulled from Arlington Public Schools when my youngest was going into 6th grade. My middle daughter, my two younger daughters, my middle daughter's going to 9th. We actually locked my son in his junior year. He was doing well, and he didn't want to be pulled, so we didn't. But then COVID hit the next year, and he came home, and he's like, Mom, it was 2 weeks before school started. He said, Mom, can you homeschool for me for my senior year? I can't do distance learning. I'm like, yes, you are here, and when are we going to homeschool you? So we pulled in and we put him dual credit in Nova. He did Northern Virginia Community College and got dual credit for his senior year high school and his first year of freshman, which is a phenomenal opportunity and saved so much money. I am all about doing that. But we homeschooled for 3 or 4 years. And then my younger daughter, my youngest, is a senior in high school this year, and she wanted to go back to public schools. And I had been saying for years, my kids will never be in public schools again. But, it's a different thing sending an 18-year-old to public schools than a 12-year-old. And so we talked about it. We decided to let her go back. I'm not sure if I'm going far afield of your questions, but it's been fascinating listening to her talk about after being in she was homeschooled 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in a private Christian school, 9th, 10th, and 11th grade. Now she's back in a public school setting, and she is so critical. And she came home a few weeks ago, and she said, my teachers all think that they are the most moral person on earth. And some of them make fun of Christians, and some of them, I don't want to talk bad about teachers, but we talked about, well, if you don't have a moral foundation, if you don't have an agreed upon moral foundation, what happens? And she said, you become your own authority. Yeah, you make your own religion. Everybody's the high priest of their own religion. And watching her recognize that and see that and knowing that's what's going on in the public schools, is every teacher is the priest of his or her own religion, has been fascinating. So I'm a big proponent of homeschool. I wish I'd done it all along. I had to go to my friends who had homeschooled, and I was a little bit like, oh, you just don't think, you just don't want your kids to experience reality. I had to go and eat humble pie for teach me your ways, please teach your ways. And they walked me through homeschooling, and it was fantastic, and I wish we'd done it all along.
Thank you. Dr. Alphonse, yes, a little bit about your model, your education model.
Sure. So I'm focused really on 3 things. So one is content-rich instruction. The second is really civic virtue. And then the third thing really would be strength and resilience. So let me just talk about each of those things. So the first thing is content-rich instruction. One of the first things that I started to notice is that in my classroom, and this is around the pandemic again, I was like, wow, the kids are really learning. I feel like at this age, I knew things that these kids are not demonstrating. And at first I thought it was just kind of anecdotal. And then what happened is just coincidentally, I went to a conference in Tennessee. It was for a social studies teacher conference. And in between conferences, I went into the exhibit hall, and I came across the National Assessment for Educational Progress representative, and they had their data out. And I think that everybody pretty much knows the NAEP scores now. But at the time, again, 6 years ago, I didn't really know about this. And what I saw is that there were they were showing that nationally there were huge declines in reading and mathematics. And I was like, "Oh, what's going on?" And interestingly, the only one that was showing that there were steady gains were the Catholic schools. And the representative even remarked to me, she was like, "Yeah, nobody really knows what's going on with Catholic schools and why they're like 20 percentage points higher." And I was like, maybe somebody should look into that, copy the model. But that was interesting to me, and I wondered what's going on. And so, again, I have a doctorate in education, and I work in a university, and I started to kind of go down a rabbit hole and see, what might this mean? Because I do see teachers working hard, but what I started to realize is that there is a lack of content that's being taught in the classroom anymore. And instead, what they pivoted to is teaching skills, which sounds like a great thing, right? We want to teach critical thinking. We want to teach reading comprehension. But what research in cognitive psychology has revealed relatively recently is that these skills, critical thinking, reading comprehension, they're built on content knowledge. What that means is that they're domain specific. If you think critically about something, it's because you know a lot about it. And there has to be a sequenced way to develop that content. And they've eliminated that within the classroom. Same goes for reading comprehension. So one of my peers here mentioned phonics, and that's half the story. Phonics needs to be taught in the schools, but the other part of that is teaching the background knowledge and exposing them to that. And so, again, that's why with my school, Norwegian Classical Academy, we're focused on content-rich instruction. The other thing that I will say, too, is that there's an emphasis in the classroom from the teacher teaching the students to more the students teaching each other, and also using screens, again, to almost replace the teacher. And the result of that, I think, is there's huge gaps in student knowledge, especially with our students who come from disadvantaged backgrounds. Kids who are in higher SES households, you're exposed to content knowledge because you go to museums, maybe you have discussions around the dinner table. And so it's not as, you don't see it as much. I think they don't reach the potential, but especially kids that have been in my classroom that maybe aren't as fortunate, you see these gaps. So that's one thing. The second thing is civic virtue, right? So I think that it doesn't matter to me where a student wants to go. You want to go to college, you want to go to vocational stuff. At the end of the day, you have to teach students how to contribute in the community. And they need to know about American institutions, civics, government, history. None of that's being taught anymore. And I think that's really important. And I attended a conference actually a few months ago, and there was a speaker, and it was really interesting because he was talking about the importance of civic virtue to our founding fathers, and how for them, happiness is not just a fleeting thing, a one and done. Happiness really is about learning to, work through your difficulties. It's about teaching others, students, determination and resilience, and, getting through something that may be difficult, but then looking back and being proud about what you accomplished. Hard work. and so again, I think that is an important part. And then the third thing is really just teaching, I think, resilience, responsibility, decorum in the classroom. That has been completely eliminated. And so, it is not uncommon to see students come into the classroom in their pajamas, with the silver frocks, and, they have the hats on, they're eating, Fritos or something like that. And that was not the case when I was in school. Again, I went to Fairfax County Public Schools 30 years ago. But there was a certain sense of decorum, and I think that, kids are kids. They're going to let them get away with things. They're going to try to, but it's our responsibility to teach them. This is how you behave. And I think that they will rise to the occasion. So it's really those three things: content-rich instructions, civic virtue, right? And then also teaching them responsibility. It's really important to me. But I will say that it's the school is going to be, even though it's classical, secular, non-sectarian, only because I want to try to open it up to as many students as possible.
That's awesome. Well, we have about 60 seconds left. So when I go all the way around that last time around, the challenge for many when I'm talking about school choice is, how do I get my kid into this? It's a transition. It's tough. Could you talk about how to get school students into, or parents who are listening? They say, "Ooh, I love that idea. How could I homeschool? I love that idea. How could I join your school? What are the transitions that's going to take for my family? The sacrifice. It's going to take my family to jump on your model." So I'll start this way and go right.
So with my school, there is no legal definition for a microschool in any of the 50 states. So in Virginia, you're either a school and you operate according to 180 days or 990 hours, or you're other. And we're in that other box. So for us, you have to, if you're interested in this, you have to actually enroll as a homeschooling student, which means that you have to submit something to the division to say that you are going to be homeschooling. And I can provide that because I am a licensed teacher in terms of the curriculum. At the end of the year, the school division wants to have basically a report card of how the student does. So there is that little logistical step, but I'm able to provide that as a licensed teacher in the state of Virginia.
Similar for homeschooling, you will just need to tell the school district that you're going to homeschool your child. There are some basic requirements for homeschooling. I believe, and you could probably correct me if I'm wrong, you just need to have a high school diploma to homeschool your own children in Virginia. As a licensed teacher, I can open up a My First School in my home, and I can be a certified tutor to homeschool other people's children. But if you're a parent who's just looking into homeschooling in Virginia, HEAV, HEAV, the Home Educators Association of Virginia.org, that would be your first place to stop. They can help on-ramp you. And nationally, HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association.org. I can't speak highly enough about them. I continue my membership with them. We're 4 years past homeschooling. And I continue my membership because I want to support that organization that is working to keep homeschooling free in the United States.
So we're over 60 seconds, but what they've said, I think it's all
I'll take some Larry's time.
right. Is all very good and right. But the core there is you need to find a community of people that can assist you and work with you if you're in a situation where you just feel totally at a loss what to do with your child in a school. Yes, you can go online, you can research, and that's an important thing to do. But more important is try to find a community of other parents who can support you and help you, because it can get complex. If you have a high school student, all you need to do is send me an email, and I have some information in the back to help you with that process.
Thank you guys so much. Let's thank you.